Hello, everyone, and good evening. Welcome to Nelson Hydro's Budget Preview and 2022 General Rate Application Presentation. My name is Ginger Lester, and I'll be your moderator tonight. I'm just going to go over a few housekeeping rules for everybody for the evening. The first thing I'd like to let the group know who's watching tonight is that this presentation, starting now, is being recorded and will be posted to the Nelson Hydro website later this week. We are using the WebEx platform tonight for hosting this meeting. If you have any issues or technical difficulties, we ask that you refer back to the email that you received to join this meeting, and there is a help link in that email. So if you do have questions tonight, we have turned the chat function off, but we would ask that you use the raise your hand function. If you go to the bottom of your page, it'll either be there under one of the icons, or if you're on your phone and you hit the three dots, you'll be able to find the raise your hand function. And we'll get to those questions during the Q&A portion of tonight's presentation. During the Q&A, we will ask that people, I'll address each one of you in order and how you raised your hands to ask your question. And when you do ask your question, we'll ask you to unmute at that time. If you don't feel like joining the live meeting and asking a question on the video tonight, you can email Nelson Hydro and nelson.ca, and your question will be answered directly from Nelson Hydro. So with that, I'm going to pass it over now to our Nelson Hydro General Manager, Scott Spencer, and he will take over the presentation.
Thank you very much, Ginger, and I appreciate everyone who taking their time this evening to join us for a presentation on our 2022 general rate application. I just want to make sure it's clear to everyone that the focus of tonight's presentation will be on rates for 2022. I understand that there will be questions about our cost of service and rate design application, which is also before the BCUC right now. However, the focus will be on the rate application, and I'll answer questions and focus things that sort of where those two applications overlap. I also want to mention that that this is a budget preview and sort of an overview of our application. We will be hosting our open house, likely virtually again this year, on November 25th. So that people can ask more in-depth questions, and my entire staff will be joining and presenting on the good work that they've been doing in the past year and what their plans are for 2022. So what I'd like to cover today is I'll give you a quick overview of the application process, the budget preparation, what we have to do in order to sort of determine what our revenue requirements are. And then I have a few revenue scenarios just to kind of give people an idea of some of the things that we're thinking about and how we had to, make those decisions. And then I've got some proposals of how we think we'll be moving forward with our rates for 2022. And then we'll finish off with some questions and answers to questions about this presentation. Before I start into the general rate application, I will just give people an idea of where the cost of service analysis and rate design application is. Nelson Hydro is submitting its final arguments to the British Columbia Utilities Commission. We will be then receiving final proposals from interveners, and finally on the 1st of December, Nelson Hydro will be submitting its reply to any responses to the interveners. So the process is still ongoing. I don't expect to be hearing back from the British Columbia Utilities Commission until about mid-February on that application. So we've prepared this presentation and our 2022 rate application without knowing what the outcomes of that proceeding will be. So there's a few things that we'll be talking about where there's some uncertainty and how we're addressing those. So in July of this year, the BCUC approved our 2021 rate application, and with that, they asked us to do a few things with respect to that application, to our next application. The first was that they encouraged us to make future rate applications effective the 1st of January to avoid confusion for our ratepayers in terms of fiscal year and when those rates were coming into effect and how we calculated that rate increase. So we are planning on doing that. The BCUC also asked for a 5-year vegetation management plan, which we have put together and will be going through in more detail at our open house in November. We've also got the capital plan that addresses reliability. They asked us to work with Fortis BC on improving reliability for loss of supply outages that Nelson Hydro experiences. And those discussions are ongoing. We actually have our first formal meeting with Fortis BC on that tomorrow to work on a continuous improvement process to develop that. And then finally, hopefully everyone has heard about our e-billing that we've been rolling out in the last couple of weeks, and they've signed up as customers to be able to access their billing information online. That's part of the CIS software implementation that we've been doing for the last 3 years, and the BCUC would like us to report on that next spring, which we will do. So because the BCUC would like us to have rates effective January 1st, we're intending to submit our application by October 29th, hoping that gives the BCUC enough time to consider the application and at least provide some direction as to whether they approve interim rates for January 1st based on our submission. To do that, we've got to include our operations and capital budgets, because that's going to tell us what our revenue requirements are. And as I mentioned before, because we have some uncertainty around the costs of service and rate design application, it's made for a little bit interesting sort of process this year. I'm going to start with some highlights on our operations. So I'll talk about 2021 and then 2022 plans. Some of the key things, of course, this year, COVID has been a fairly prominent thing in all of our lives. At Nelson Hydro, we've experienced minimal impacts. Probably the most significant that we have really had to tackle has been procurement delays, where key materials are longer lead than we are used to, and having to plan around that. We've also had a number of extreme weather impacts, and I have them listed here. I'm sure most of you remember the windstorm in January that was unexpected. We had the coldest day of on record in February. In April, we had yet another windstorm, not quite as significant as the one in January, but it ranked in the top 3 of the top 3 largest 3 windstorms on record for Nelson Hydro. And we also had a very low water year, so that's impacted us as well as all the other utilities within the region and in the Western United States as well. So that's impacted pricing and a number of other things that I'll speak to. We had the record heat in June, which has increased purchase power. We don't normally see as high as what we did this year. And then, of course, with that came that prolonged fire season. And we tried to make sure people understood that we had to and do as a routine during extreme fire hazards, turn off our reclosers so that we reduce the fire hazard. And that, of course, resulted in an increased number and duration of outages and complicated our vegetation management program, because we were only able to work on emergency work that was potentially able to cause a wildfire. This year, we also had quite a bit of regulatory activities with the 2 submissions. We answered almost 1,200 information requests from the BCUC and other interveners. I've been actively participating in 5 different regulatory proceedings, the 2 of our own, plus 3 others the BCUC has initiated that have a material impact on Nelson Hydro's operations. And that has resulted in considerable amount of staff time from all departments in the city. So we've taken that into consideration as we've been working through this budget. So some of the highlights for this year, you can see that comparing to what we budgeted and what we'd forecast, we're actually a little bit forecasting a little bit higher revenues. Some of our power purchases were actually lower than what we had thought from our revised budget. And I'll just remind people that in March of this year, I applied to the Mayor and Council to increase our budget specifically for power purchases and other for storm repairs as a result of the significant expenses that were unplanned that we incurred at the beginning of the year, namely that 13th of January storm and that's February cold snap. So we added that into the budget, and so we actually did better in terms of our power purchase costs than what we had expected at that time. We also had a reduced capital plan, and I'll be speaking to the capital later on in the presentation. So now I'm going to just give you a quick overview to give you a sense for graphically sort of where we're going to end up. So just slightly under budget for our operations expenses, which includes all of our operations maintenance as well as our power purchase expenses. And this also kind of helps us give us a sense for that we think we're on track to be fairly accurate with that. Because we're submitting this so early, we only have the financial records up to the end of the second quarter, which is the end of June. We do have a sense for what our expenses are, but we typically have at least the third quarter results in when we're preparing this budget. So this year we're a little bit less certain, but we think that we're on track based on this graph. The 2022 budget. So some of the key things that we're thinking about for 2022. So the first thing, of course, we have to consider is that Fortis is increasing the rates. They've applied to the BCUC for a 3.46% rate increase on all of our purchased power, which makes, as you saw, makes up 50% of our expenses. The rest of our costs are generally inflationary, but we do have some exceptions. We are putting more money into our vegetation management, especially the North Shore. We have a 3-year rotation that where we have a focus area, and this in 2021 it was the city. Even though we did do quite a bit of work in the rural areas, especially the North Shore, but next year we'll be really putting an effort into the North Shore because that's where we've been seeing our most impactful outages. So make major effort towards mitigating some of that this coming year. For the major storms, I've increased the major storm budget. It was a new budget item in 2019. We're seeing an exponential increase over the last 4 years. So we've budgeted accordingly to accommodate for that. And I will talk a little bit later about potential for a storm reserve, where if we don't spend the budget we've allocated this year, it goes into a reserve and then allows us to then use that money in future years and keep a reserve, not unlike we have for our capital reserve. So we have a little bit more for our increased regulatory expenses. We're not expecting 2022 to be as busy from a regulatory perspective as 2021, but we have put in additional funds to accommodate sort of what appears to be sort of a trend in sort of more expectations from the regulator. And then finally, we have been working very hard this year on gaining some operational efficiencies, and we want to make sure that we can keep those sustained into 2022. So what that means in terms of a budget, we're expecting a little bit of growth within the service areas. So we're expecting an increased budget in our rates, in our revenues. Our other revenue, which is typically things like TELUS paying a share of pole replacements, will be dropping. They are just winding down their aerial make ready project for their fiber, which saw a fairly large uptick in shared pole replacements. So that'll be winding down in 2022. As far as power purchases go, we're expecting an increase to power purchases, maybe not sort of the full 3.46%, because we're looking at our rate model that takes in the previous 5-year averages and forecasts out. So we're forecasting a little bit more, but not quite as much as the full 3.46 that Fortis is increasing the rates. Our operating expenses will be going up to accommodate for some of the new initiatives that we've talked about to try and improve reliability. And I promised before that we were going to talk about capital, but I do have a note here just to sort of remind people. So right now we have a dividend return sort of amount that we're estimating. We did apply for with our cost of service analysis, a return on equity, ROE, to align with the way FortisBC and other utilities value the capital investments that are made, and we will be looking at that in the future. But for now, for this presentation and for this application, we're just looking at the status quo, which is a dividend-based amount, and where surpluses are being directly applied to the capital reserve. It will be up to council and future decisions to determine how they will invest that capital return in the future. So for 2021 capital, so this is our major projects and infrastructure that we're doing. We had planned for 2.9 million. We're only likely to spend about 2.6 million at this point. The major impact, the reason that we're underspent this year is because we have had to defer our major overhaul of our unit number 5, which was the result of discovery of a leak in our vent shaft, which did not allow us to take that unit offline this summer as expected. We are effectuating that repair next week, and we'll be doing that. That will then allow us to safely enter the turbine for the following year to do that major overhaul, which will be the first since its installation in 1995. The Harrop Proctor pole replacement has been ongoing all summer. If you're living out in that area, you've probably seen the work that's been ongoing. They are on track to complete the end of next week, and we're expecting that project is also going to be coming in under budget. We've planned for a generator, backup generator in our power plant for some time, so that is ongoing. It was delayed slightly because of the long lead times for COVID items, but we believe we will be receiving that generator in time for the new year, before the new year, and installed. And then finally, our SCADA, that's our system control and data acquisition system. We've been doing some major upgrades. We now have fiber to all of our substations, and are going to be upgrading all the hardware in the next month or so, and that looks like it's on track, and it's going to be able to give us a lot better data to manage our reliability and our outages better. So going into 2022, we had a big year planned when we submitted our application last year for 2022. Because we've moved over an extra 500,000 for the major overhaul, that's now 4.4 million. So we've got a big year ahead of us to do some work. We are going to be moving forward with our advanced metering infrastructure, otherwise known as smart meters. There's a lot of work to do that will take several years. This first year, we're planning on doing most of our project planning and setting ourselves up with data management software and all of the protocols to be able to make that successful. This is a really key one to improve reliability, because we'll be able to target where outages are happening and both respond to them better, as well as see trends and be able to improve them going forward. As mentioned, our G5 major overhaul has been carried over to this year. We are adding in some scope to do a generator inspection at the same time. That was originally not in the scope, but because we've pushed it off for a year, want to get both of those things done at the same time. Recently, we during some routine switching, we discovered that we had some safety issues with the vault covers in our downtown vaults. So we are replacing one of them this week that was in critical need of repair, and then the rest are planned for next year. So we'll be working our way around the downtown to fix up those vault covers. We are putting in some reliability initiatives with respect to our, especially with the wildlife. So putting in some guards to prevent that in our switch substations. And then finally, our Mill Street substation has been on our books for replacement. It was scheduled to start in 2023. We did have a transformer failure this summer, which has accelerated that and made that a big priority for us this year. So that is hoping to go ahead this year, and it will be essentially phase one of that planned substation replacement. And then just to recap on the budget, so I've made this waterfall chart so you can see sort of, based on relative to our forecast for 2021, there's going to be more money spent on power purchases, vegetation management, our operations and maintenance. The dividend goes up slightly, and then our other revenue, as I said, our other revenue is lower than what we had last year, so that means it's going to be a increased cost or sort of a positive sort of influence on that. And then of course our storm repairs, while compared to our original 2021 budget is smaller compared to our forecast, because we've spent over $600,000 on storm repairs in 2021. I'm only budgeting 500,000, which is a lot more than we've had in the past, but it's less, so it shows as a positive in that chart. We've got some customer growth, and then our capital plan will be almost $2 million more invested in 2022 than in 2021, which leaves us with about $2.4 million that we have to figure out where that comes from, whether it's rates or from decreasing our capital reserve. So I promised to talk about rate revenue scenarios. So I've reduced it down. We actually looked at 18 different scenarios, different ways that we could look at rates. Some of them complicated, some of them more straightforward. I'm presenting these to you to illustrate to the public and our customers what some of the work that we've been doing to try to sort of determine what our rate proposal is for next year. So I'll just talk about each one of these in turn. The 0% rate increase is essentially a do nothing. If we didn't increase rates for the next 5 years, you can see the yellow line, which represents sort of the balance of our capital reserve, and the difference between the gray bars, which is the amount of money that we're putting into the capital reserve, versus the green bars, which is the amount of money we're taking out. So that line, of course, starts to go down if we're not increasing rates. So we end up, at the end of 2022, we still have money in the capital reserve, but by the end of 2024, it's basically empty. And if we didn't do a rate increase this year, we would still be okay because we'd still have 5 million in our capital reserve, but that would mean that we would then have to, do a larger rate increase or do something different next year to try and achieve all the capital that we need to gain those reliability improvements that we're looking for and provide better service to our customers. So that's what doing nothing looks like. In the past, we've gone with flat rate increases. So this is what 2.5% rate increase over the next 5 years looks like. So you can see that we're in better shape at the end of 2022. 2023, we're starting to sort of dip below our preferred line. The BCUC has indicated to us that anything below a reserve projection below 3 million is unacceptable. Nelson City Council has indicated they prefer to keep us between 10 and 5 million to do that. Again, we'd still be okay at the end of 2022, but going forward, we would have to think about whether we needed to increase rates more than 2.5 in order to adjust for that. I did want to just point out to everyone that we do have the COSA reserve, or the cost of service analysis increase that would impact rural residential customers. If that increase came into place at the same time as a 2.5% rate increase, you can see it keeps us healthy going forward, and we could probably look at lower rate increases or sort of how things are looking once we get out farther into 2025 and 2026. And then finally, the last item I wanted to just talk about is with our cost of service analysis that was done and submitted with our rate application for the rural residential increase. We also, the results of that also showed that we had, we were revenue neutral from the urban customers, but our residential rates were about 12% too high for the cost of service, and the commercial rates are about 12% too low. So that's something that we need to think about and to address. If we move forward with this, it would be probably the same duration as what we've proposed for the cost of service increase for the rural residential. So that will be a 3-year rate proposal. So we're looking at what that would look like, but it would mean a 4% increase for urban residential and a 4% decrease for urban commercial to balance that out. And then finally, just want to follow up. So, one of the things that, we often talk about is our comparison, where are we relative to Fortis BC? Would we be better off, with Fortis BC? This was a table that we put together in response to a question from the BCUC about what our rates would look like relative to Fortis BC. And so these are existing rates. It says rural, but for the residential, they're identical in the city of Nelson as well, customers. So we took a low, a medium, or an average, and a high use customer, and then we calculated out sort of what their monthly bill would be from Nelson Hydro and what the monthly bill would be for Fortis BC. And as you can see, for the residential rates, Nelson Hydro is sitting at about 21 to 26% lower, depending on how much you're consuming, with the high consumer sort of paying a fair bit more at that rate. And the commercial rates for Nelson Hydro are higher than what Fortis BC is charging, and so therefore commercial customers are paying a little bit more than what they would be for if they were with Fortis BC. So just wanted to put that into context for everyone. And I'm going to wrap up with just talking about what I'm proposing right now based on the information that I presented tonight. We think that our operations and capital budget are reasonable. They reflect the priorities that Nelson Hydro has and the city has, as well as the BCUC in terms of improving reliability and investing in infrastructure to provide better service to our customers. We're looking at establishing a storm reserve expense, as I discussed earlier. I think that for 2022, our best approach is to move forward with a 2.5% general rate increase. It's what we had forecast last year. It looks like that is a reasonable thing to do for 2022, given that we don't know what's happening with our cost of service analysis and the results of that. And then for now, we're going to just keep that 2.5% rate increase forecast for years beyond 2022 until we know what's happening with our rural customers and the residential rates there. And because the rate rebalancing is going to take a number of years, I'm also recommending that we actually proceed with our urban rate rebalancing starting in 2022. And that's what I have to present to everyone tonight. And I'm going to pass it over to Ginger to allow her to moderate the discussion.
Thanks for that, Scott. That was a great presentation. So we're going to get into our Q&A portion of this evening. So for those who have already submitted a question ahead of time via email, if your question hasn't been answered tonight, Nelson Hydro will be responding to you via email. We'd ask that people focus on the presentation with respect to their questions tonight. We ask that people be respectful of time and respectful of each other and staff. And we'd like to point out that this is not a forum for complaints or questions of a personal nature. So we'd ask that you not address those types of questions tonight either. Again, you can always email nelsonhydro@nelson.ca, and those types of questions can be addressed in that forum. So what we're going to do, if there is anyone who'd like a question or has a question, if they want to raise their hand on the function on the WebEx, if you have figured out how to do that, and then we will answer those questions. And Scott may have a question or two that he can answer if we, until we have, oh, there, no, I haven't got anyone yet. We'll just wait a few minutes, and Scott or Kevin, maybe you want to jump in and answer anything in the meantime?
Yeah, there was a question about vegetation management that someone submitted, and as I mentioned earlier, that is front of mind for us. It's been a big push this year. I'm hoping that people have seen the crews out in the rural areas as well as within the city. We rolled out our vegetation management best practices this year, so it's a good guiding document that we had help with preparing, so that we're following the best practices of the industry, and especially within BC here. And we feel like it's being successful so far. We will take a couple of years for the results to really start to show up in our reliability statistics, I suspect. But we are investing heavily this year, and we are continuing on with a good program. The city hired two utility arborists, or one utility arborist and one arborist who's apprenticing as a utility arborist, and they've been doing great work for us and helping us focus our efforts, as well as the efforts of the contract vegetation management contractors that we use.
Okay, and just for anyone who came in late, if you're not sure where the raise hand function is, there's a small icon with kind of a happy face and a plus sign at the bottom of your desktop. And if you click on that, at the very top is the raise hand. And if you're on your mobile device, there's three little dots at the bottom of your screen to the right, and you can click on that to find raise your hand. But if not, oh, I have one here, Charlie Zinkin. If you'd like to unmute and ask your question, that'd be great.
Yeah, actually, I got two quick questions. One, in our past discussions, Ramona Faust and Scott, you've discussed about some commercial or some residential users that seem to be consuming too much power and therefore should be commercial. And I'm wondering whether any investigation into that has happened, and whether the amounts we're dealing with is really significant, one way or the other, from a budget point of view. And the other question I've got is going back to the cost. I know you don't want to talk about the cost of living analysis, but you did say publicly that should it be turned down, Nelson Hydro would look at divesting itself of the residential rates. Has there been any discussions on that? And I recognize no decisions would be made because the outstanding COSA, but has there been any discussions? So two questions. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Charlie. Appreciate the questions, very well thought out. And so with respect to the discussions with Fortis BC, I'll start with that one. With respect to the discussions with Fortis BC, so we did make that public that there was some discussions with Fortis BC. They've expressed an interest in acquiring the rural area, and they are conducting due diligence activities as we speak. We've answered a few questions of theirs. They will be having some of their staff tour our facilities later this in the month of October. So that is ongoing in parallel. Council has directed me to keep our options open in terms of how we're going to be moving forward, and COSA sort of is one. The discussions with Fortis BC is another, and we are also looking at other options that might involve restructuring the Nelson Hydro to try and make sure that that we can remain viable and have a sustainable plan going forward that also serves our ratepayers and the people that we serve. So hopefully that answers that question. And when people ask two questions, it's hard to keep track of both. Remind me what the first one was.
The other one was residential rates that were appeared to maybe be commercial in nature. And has there been any investigation into those? And is it really significant anyways?
Yeah. Thanks. Sorry, I drew a blank there after I heard your second question, and yeah, we identified that during the process with the BCUC. A number of IRs were asking about that, and we identified, during that we do have a number of residential, both urban, but many in the rural area that are consuming many times the average consumption for a residential home, far beyond what you would for just a typical electric heat user in the rural area. So we have been looking at that. The highest consumers have received letters to notify them that we're interested in how they're using their around their consumption, and that we will be installing demand meters in order to be able to sort of assess the actual cost for their power. So we'll be ongoing discussions with those rural and urban residential users who are the top 1%. Is it a major impact on the overall cost of service to the ratepayers? And the answer is no, it's not. We think that people should be paying their fair rate, but at the same time, it's not a significant thing. It's not shifting the balance. What it does is it tends to shift what the average consumer is. When we look at an average, if we take all of our customers and divide it by the use, we come up with a number, and then when we actually sort of analyze that and think, maybe that's being skewed by some of these really high use customers. So we are addressing that within the system and with those customers directly.
All right. It looks like Jamie has a question. Jamie, you can unmute yourself, and but if I believe you submitted a question. So if it is the same question, we will respond to you by email.
Actually, it was over Scott's presentation where you indicated that in 2022 you had forecast about $300,000 for substation outage prevention. I'm kind of curious, out of all the outages that we've had this year, how many actually started right at the source in the substation? And, as opposed to out on the lines where we had trees or animals or birds, whatever the case may be, how many of those actually started the substation?
Yeah, I don't have those statistics off the top of my head, Jamie. Thanks very much for asking. I appreciate the question. One of the things that we do recognize is that a lot of those, the birds that we saw this summer, in particular in July when the reclosers were off, were based in from the substation, where we've got those lines coming in fairly close proximity. And we know that guards do make a difference. When I was in the Northwest Territories, that was one of the initiatives that we had. We had quite a few Raven contacts, and we were able to improve reliability significantly by making that investment. And I think we'll see some improvements at our substations from those guards.
And what kind of guards are we talking about? We're just talking about like a plastic guard that would, say, go over like the H1 of a power transformer that would, essentially, kind of increase the amount of space between like an open conductor and a grounded case on a power transformer. That's all we're talking about, right? Is a plastic bird guard?
Yeah,
that's essentially what it's like.
I'm sorry, it kind of lost volume here.
That was me. Sorry about that. Sorry about that, Jamie. I muted myself by accident. Yeah, my apologies. The guards are in fact those plastic covers that you're referring to. They're an insulated shield that keeps the accidental bird contact between conductors from causing an outage or a trip.
And we haven't installed those prior, like when we opened up the Rosemont sub, there wasn't any of those bird guards put into place. It just seems
That's
that $300,000 for a bird guard seems fairly excessive. I mean, I don't mean to put you on the spot. I'm just, would like to, like a justification. Like that seems like quite a bit of money for a plastic bird guard that potentially should have been in place when, these new subs were installed. I mean, you can install them with a hot stick. It doesn't take any major outages or, so I mean, trying to take that into account for cost, I mean, it doesn't really compute, I guess.
Yeah, you're welcome to take a look at the cost of those on the commercial market. They are expensive, because of the applications that they're in. So that's what we are estimating. If we can do it for less, we absolutely will be looking for cost savings as we put the project forward.
Okay, thank you.
Ginger, you're muted now.
Sorry about that. Does anyone want to put up their hand to ask another question tonight? Not seeing any other questions.
I have a question that was asked by email. Someone was wondering about other energy sources, and we might be able to touch a bit on that at the open house, but I can answer it now. Someone was asking about sort of is there power generation opportunities below the dam and things like that, and I will say that one of the things that we are doing in 2022 as part of our strategic projects is we're looking at all of the previous studies and things to increase capacity. The main driver for that has been the demand charges that we've seen from Fortis as a result of that cold spell in February. It really sort of helped us realize that there's some cost savings that can be achieved through peak shaving. So we are doing a study to take a look at that. We'll resurrect some of the older sort of capacity increases. We'll also be looking at load management and other opportunities. So there are things that are being addressed. I'm not familiar specifically with the project that's referenced here in Squamish, but we are certainly looking at things that are opportunities. I know the Nelson Nest Lab has been working on some proposals, or a proposal for a hydrokinetic development project that they're looking at, and I've been involved in helping with them. The Columbia Institute of Renewable Energy is also having a conference tomorrow, and we're keeping an eye on anything that comes up within the region. So we are looking for opportunities. We'll be re-looking at some of the opportunities that have been explored before, but we're definitely cognizant of the fact that our load is growing, and increased power purchases cost us more, and as we look to the future at the Fortis resource plans, we want to make sure that we're preparing our own resource plans to be able to increase our capacity as our load does, as in the province starts to see increased power costs within the next 10 years or so, as demand starts to outstrip the actual installed capacity, and new investments need to be made. So we're trying to prepare ourselves for the future with that, and help our immediate needs of peak shaving and load management. The advanced metering infrastructure we expect will help, because it'll give us better data and allow us to explore more things like aggregated battery storage or other things that might help sort of for that instantaneous or outage related power needs.
Okay, great, Scott. Unless we have any other questions, I think that we might be done for the evening. And just a reminder that we will be taking this presentation and putting it on the Nelson Hydro webpage at nelson.ca/hydro. So we'd like to thank everybody again for attending tonight, and you can always email your questions to nelsonhydro@nelson.ca. Thank you, everybody.